Alright, so this lesson here is on solving quadratics using the quadratic formula. And you'll see this is on the top of the page for the checkups, but I want to do it separately. Now the quadratic formula itself, it's actually derived from completing the square, right? But what it is to solve a quadratic, to find the values of x that make the quadratic true, right? The formula we use is the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now with this, right, what you have to understand is there's one important part of this, and it's this here, all right? And this part of the formula has a name, and it's called the discriminant. Okay? And the discriminant is just the b squared minus 4ac. Now, the nice part about the discriminant is it tells us the number of solutions. If that value is positive, you should get 2 solutions in the end. If this discriminant is negative, you will not get a solution. Now, your curriculum, there is none of these right now. All right, but if your discriminant is 0, you would get 1 solution, right? So when we go to do this, the first thing I like to do, you must do, is set the quadratic equal to 0. Okay, so you should have it in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Then you're going to gather a, b, and c and evaluate the discriminant. Once you find a, b, and c and evaluate the discriminant, then you're basically going to evaluate the quadratic formula, which I rewrite as x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of the discriminant all over 2 times a. All right, take a minute, write this down, and then let's go take a look at the checkup. Now for the checkup, I'm not going to go through all the problems. I'm going to go through some, and then I'm basically going to upload the answer key to it so that you guys, so that you can go do a couple of practice problems before you do the quiz. So the first one. First problem is already set equal to 0. So right away we can gather a is equal to 2 here, b is equal to 4, and c is negative 6. Now you're going to want to have your calculator here because when we evaluate the discriminant, you're going to get, right now if b is 4, we're going to do 4 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 6. Now when you evaluate this in the calculator, you're going to plug it in exactly the way you see it. So once I go to evaluate this, I plug it in the calculator. I go open parentheses, 4, close parentheses. I hit the square button, and then I use the minus sign, 4 times 2 times negative 6, right? You have to make sure you hit the same buttons, and it's good that when I write this down or do it in the calculator, you should make sure you get the same answer. When I evaluate this, I get 64. So now I can go ahead and plug everything into the quadratic formula. So again, the quadratic formula up above here is the opposite of b. So if b is 4, we're going to put negative 4 plus or minus the square root of, we already evaluated that. We said the discriminant, or the b squared minus 4ac, was 64. So all we have to do is put that under there. All divided by 2 times a is 2. So now, from here I get 2 answers. The first answer is I'm going to add the numerators. So I would get negative 4 plus the square root of 64 all over 2 times 2 is 4. My other solution would be negative 4. Instead of adding, now I'm going to subtract the square root of 64 and then divide that by 4. So right away in my calculator, I'm going to go -4 plus the square root of 64. I'm going to hit enter. That's going to give me 4 divided by 4 will give me 1. So one of my solutions is 1. Then the other one, -4 minus the square root of 64. I hit enter, and then right away I divide that by 4, and I would get x equals -3. Alright, so if you look here, if I plug this in, what do these answers mean? Well, 2 times 1 squared plus 4 times 1 minus 6, this gives me 2 plus 4, which is 6, minus 6 is 0. That makes it true. And then if I plug -3 back into the original equation, it would make it equal 0 also. Now in the next one, I know I could factor it, but we're going to do number 3, and we're going to say here a is equal to 1, b is equal to -5, c is equal to -6. So I evaluate my discriminant, and I get -5 squared minus 4 times 1 times -6. And if I plug that in the calculator exactly the way I see it, I'm going to go in parentheses -5 squared. That is always going to be positive. Minus 4 times 1 times -6. And you get a discriminant with the value of 49. So I know I'm going to have two answers, and now I can go do the quadratic formula. If b is -5, when I plug it into the formula, I do the opposite of -5, which is +5, plus or minus the square root of 49, all over 2 times a is 1. So now my two answers, 5 plus the square root of 49, all over 2. My second answer, 5 minus the square root of 49, all over 2. This would give me 5 plus the square root of 49 is 7. So 5 plus 7 divided by 2 is 12 over 2, which is 6. And the other one would be 5 minus 7 divided by 2, which is -2 over 2, which gives you -1. Okay? So it's being able to simplify these or even put it in the calculator is critical. All right? Let's look at a couple others. So for number 4, now this is where it gets a little more chaotic, right? So I know a is 1, b is 5, c is -2. So right away I evaluate the discriminant. So 5 squared minus 4 times 1 times -2 gives me a discriminant of, I go to my handy dandy calculator, 5 squared minus 4 times 1 times -2, and I get 33. So right away here, now I go to my quadratic formula. If b is 5, the opposite of 5 is -5, plus or minus the square root of 33, all over 2 times 1. So right now what they want you to see is this would be -5 plus or minus the square root of 33 over 2. This is what we consider the exact solution, but they like you to break it up into -5 plus the square root of 33 all over 2. The other one is -5 minus the square root of 33 all over 2. And those would be your two solutions. Okay? Now, the next one. Right away I find a is 3, b is -2, c is -3. So, I evaluate the discriminant. -2 squared minus 4 times 3 times -3. What is this going to give me? When I pull out my calculator, I'm going to get negative 2 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 3, and right away I get 40. Now, one thing like they don't really set you up on how to do this very well with is when you find the exact answer. If b is negative 2, the opposite of b is 2 plus or minus the square root of 40 all over 2 times 3. So one version of the solutions would be 2 plus or minus the square root of 40 all over 6. So this, breaking up into the two solutions, would be one way to write your answer. But, yeah. So now what they want you to do is rewrite this as 2 plus or minus. Now, they take the square root of 40 and they say, all right, this breaks up into the square root of 4 times the square root of 10. Now, what is the square root of 4 going to simplify to? 2. Can I simplify the square root of 10? No. So now they want you to break this up into 2 plus or minus 2 root 10 all over 6. But if you notice here now, right, 2, 2, and 6 can all be divided by 2. And when I divide all of these by 2, they see this as being 2 divided by 2 is 1, plus or minus 2 divided by 2 is 1 root 10, all over 6 divided by 2 is 3. So now they want you to see the answers as being 1 plus the square root of 10 over 3, and the other one being 1 minus the square root of 10 over 3. When you go to simplify these radicals, the ones you're trying to break them up into are the square root of 4, the square root of 9, square root of 16, square root of 25, square root of 36, square root of 49, 64, 81, or 100. And to generate this list, all I did was take my counting numbers and raise them to the second power. 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, square root of 16 would be 4, 25, and so on. So this translates to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So anytime you see the square root of 4, you know it's 2. If you see the square root of 49, right, that's 7. All right. Now, our next one. Okay, let's go ahead and look at number 8. So, right away I go to evaluate the discriminant. So, A is 3, B is negative 2, C is negative 2. So, my discriminant would be negative 2 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 2. And if I go to my calculator, I'm going to plug it in exactly the way I see it. Negative 2 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 2. And right away that gives me 28. So now the quadratic formula tells me b is negative 2. I get 2 plus or minus the square root of 28 all over 2 times 3. So right away the square root of 28, right? If you take that list we talked about just up above, which one of these? 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81, or 100 go into 28. And we would break that up into the square root of 4 times the square root of 7. So we're going to say this is 2 plus or minus. The square root of 28 is going to break up into the square root of 4 is 2 square root 7. All divided by 2 times 3 is 6. And now, what could 2, 2, and 6 all be divided by? 2 again. 2 divided by 2 is 1, plus or minus 2 divided by 2 is 1 root 7, all over 6 divided by 2 is 3. All right. Now, do me a favor, that should give you enough, of an idea of what the quadratic formula is. So what I want you to do is go ahead and do 2, 5, 7, 9, and 10 on your own, and then check your answers with the answer key to make sure you did it properly. Then go do the quiz. All right? Once you know how to do 1 or 2 of these, right, the rest are very, very, very straightforward. Okay?